Welcome to Empowered. I'm Elizabeth Naumovski. We all know the term divorce and the devastation it can have on families, both adults and their children. But what exactly is gray divorce? We've heard the term. On today's episode, we'll find out how it affects a woman's retirement and her finances. And we'll also discuss the challenges we see women facing when dealing with gray divorce. And we'll learn about what steps women should take prior to even contemplating divorce. Today, my guest is Julie Seberras. She's head of wealth planning and practice management at Manulife Wealth. Julie, welcome to Empowered.
Thank you so much for having me, Elizabeth.
So let's just jump in. Let's talk about the definition. What is gray divorce?
Yeah, so gray divorce is actually defined as divorce at age 50 plus. So really we're talking about primarily the baby boomer generation, but we're definitely also getting into that sort of first portion of Generation X. What we get with gray divorce, of course, is couples who've been married sometimes for 20 plus years, could be 30 years. And so the longer you've been married, generally the more sort of assets or complexities get introduced into the situation when you're looking to get divorced.
So can you tell us what the trends are? Like what trends are you seeing with this generation when it comes to divorce?
Yeah, so these numbers are on the rise. So it really, you can sort of slice and dice the numbers different ways. But if we take a look at, from 2010 to 2020, Stats Canada tell us that this number has increased to 80, it has increased 80% over that 10-year time horizon. So, what we're seeing is there's a lot less stigma related to divorce. Maybe, 20 or 30 years ago, there was a lot more stigma associated with it. We're also seeing longer life expectancies, and people want to be happy in their lifetime. And so if they're finding that, they have still, many good years ahead of them and they want to be happy and they're finding in their current situation they're not, they are seeking out that happiness. Now, and of course, we are seeing women feeling a little bit more empowered, and you are seeing, women initiating these divorces more than men. So it is quite interesting. And you are also seeing, of course, like children have moved on and moved out of the house in some of these scenarios. And this is where, couples are looking at each other and saying, is this how we want to be spending the rest of our lives? Are we really happy together? So, once sort of those child rearing years are behind them, they're starting to look at themselves and what's important for them.
So, Julie, what challenges do you see women facing when they're dealing with gray divorce?
Yeah, so this is a generation, Elizabeth, where, often the men were the breadwinner and women often took a back seat when it comes to managing the day-to-day finances, in addition to managing the money overall. So we often see sort of lower levels of financial literacy and lower levels of engagement when it comes to those day-to-day finances, as well as, managing the money. Now, sometimes what goes along with that is also sort of not having their own money and not having, what goes along with that, such as like their own credit. So credit, of course, is built based on usage of credit, have your own credit cards and bills in your name. And if you don't have credit cards or bills in your name, then you're not going to have that, that's sort of core to what you need to move on to your own financial situation after the divorce. So, and of course, when you're getting divorced, that is, there's a lot of emotional stress that you're dealing with, and trying to, up your financial literacy and get a handle on your own financial situation, if you haven't already been engaged, can be a very difficult time and not the time that you want to be starting this learning journey.
So, you've mentioned financial literacy quite a few times already, just in the first
Yeah.
segment. And I think it's something that women should embrace and not be afraid of. And I constantly say, if you don't know, ask. That's one of the things that my mother embedded in my brain.
Yeah.
The other thing you talked about as well, which I think is really important, is have your own credit card. There's so many women out there that have a secondary or supplementary credit card to their husbands. And when it comes time for them to leave, they don't have a credit score. They don't have a credit card or any bills in their names, and they can't rent an apartment or even get their own credit card. So when we come back, I want to talk more in depth about what steps women should be taking prior to contemplating divorce, because this is a huge topic, especially for the women that are 50 plus. And a lot of them have actually gone through divorce during COVID lockdown. So please don't go away.
Mhm.
We'll be right back with more Gray Divorce with Julie Seberras. Welcome back to Empowered. I'm Elizabeth Naumovski. Today, we're discussing the financial impact of gray divorce. So, Julie, before we went to break, we said we were going to talk about this because it's really important. What steps should women be taking prior to even contemplating divorce?
Yeah, so I think, it's really important to take inventory. So I always say, know what you owe, know what you own, know money you have coming in, and know what money you have going out. So what this means is, money you owe. This is everything from your mortgage, lines of credit cards, anything, any debt that you have. Then you also want to take a look at what you own. So this is your, RSPs. This is your savings. This is your TFSAs. This is your everyday bank accounts. This is pension plans with your employer. So what do you have there? And that'll really help you understand, how much money are you going to have on the other side of this, potentially on the other side of the divorce. Now, it's also important to understand cash flow. So how much money is coming into the household right now and how much money is going out? So you really want to have a good understanding of all of those household bills. And, it is quite common, Elizabeth, for couples to divide and conquer when it comes to managing the household finances. And this is where a lot of women don't have a strong understanding of those household finances and what's coming in and what's going out. And so it's hard to really understand what does that lifestyle look like on the other side if you don't have a firm understanding of what that looks like today. And of course, I would always recommend engaging the right professionals. So in this case, this of course can include a lawyer, possibly an accountant, and a financial advisor or financial planner to help you take a look at this information.
So you said something that was important. You were talking about debt. And some people are under the misconception that, oh, if I didn't take out the debt and my partner did, that's their debt and it's not mine. But that's not true, is it?
Well, these situations are very much what I'd call an it depends situation. And so, it may be the case that that debt is owned collectively between the couples. And so, we need to take a look at the net worth situation. And so you could be fine on the asset side, but if you have a ton of debt that's offsetting that, then you really don't have a lot of assets at the end of the day. And, the younger generation is probably more prone to this, but, when it comes to sort of little equity in their homes, right? That, the cost of, housing these days and the size of the mortgages that people have taken on, it is not uncommon, for there to be a lot of debt, especially on the mortgage side of things.
So, okay, so what are the immediate actions that should be taken once faced with divorce?
So, of course, as I mentioned, engage the right professionals. So, you'll want to sort of engage a lawyer, I would say, at this point in time. I would also, if sort of the money is there to be, if the woman has her own money or enough to engage a financial advisor, I would recommend getting their own financial advisor if they are working with the same advisor as their husband. And the reason for that is, of course, a financial advisor needs to be objective and is working towards the collective goals of that couple. Now, if you're getting divorced, chances are your goals are going to start to differ at that point in time. And it can be quite difficult for an advisor to work collectively with the couple. So I would encourage when the time is right to get your own advisor. You're also going to need to start to take a look at cash flow. I think that's really important to do immediately. So, what are the lifestyle expenses going to be to move out onto their own or whatever your living situation is going to be? And can you afford that? And also understanding what type of lifestyle you can afford. It might be very different than the lifestyle that you are living as a married couple. And then, I'd also recommend, sort of starting to look at that financial plan. And so it could be things like you might be insured under your spouse's health and dental plan through their employer. If you were to get divorced, that insurance coverage generally is no longer. And so you'd have to think about those types of expenses. And of course, generally getting a divorce is not free of legal fees, and legal fees can be costly. And especially if we're getting into complexities or animosity with a divorce, those legal fees can be astronomical. So, each couple is different in what those legal fees are going to be, but you'd need to be able to pay those expenses ongoing.
So I've heard of some couples that decided absolutely to not divorce because the lifestyle change would be so drastic that they thought it would be better to just live together separately, have separate lives, but still belong to the club and still go out and do whatever they were doing as part of a couple, because when they split everything in half, there really wasn't that much for both of them to go on. and become separate couples. But when we come back, I want to talk to you and pick your brain about maybe some long-term action and what people should, like what action should be taken once faced with divorce. So please don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Empowered. I'm Elizabeth Naumovski. We're discussing gray divorce and the financial implications to women. So, Julie, we were talking about short-term actions, but I want to get into long-term actions. What are the long-term actions that should be taken once somebody is faced with divorce?
Yeah, so as a financial planner, I'm going to say you really want to dig into that financial plan. And of course, a financial plan is a living document and needs to be updated as your circumstances change. So I'd say this is not a one and done. You really want to be revisiting this over time. So we want to be taking a look at your net worth and cash flow, taking inventory now post divorce. What is this looking like from how much do you owe? How much do you own? What's coming in and what's going out, and adjusting that as you need to based on changes in those circumstances. The other big piece for this generation, of course, Elizabeth, is going to be the retirement plan, right? You're going to need to, chances are, reimagine your retirement. You may currently be in retirement, you may be approaching retirement. Retirement plans are generally done for couples as a household. And so you really now need to think about what differences are going to be sort of surfacing. And with this sort of generation that we're talking about, you don't necessarily have the runway to recoup money. Anybody who has been through a divorce will tell you it has a significant financial impact. And when you're younger, you have that runway ahead of you to sort of recoup that money. So now you're working with sort of what you have and maybe limited runway to be able to make up for that. You may have been taking a look at, if one person had a defined benefit plan, there's some survivor benefits that would be available. That would be no longer if you're no longer spouses. You may have been thinking about some income splitting or Canada pension plan splitting. If you're not a couple, those options are no longer. So reimagine that retirement or recalibrate your retirement if you're already in it. The other piece that sorry, go ahead, Elizabeth.
No, please go ahead.
You're saying. And so the other piece that you do not want to overlook is your estate plan. Wills and powers of attorney, chances are your spouse was named as your executor and or your power of attorney. And it is so important to revisit those appointments to make sure that they still make sense. Now, it still may make sense that your ex-spouse is your executor or power of attorney, but the most important part is that you revisit it and make sure it is accurate and up to date and reflective of your wishes. And then, of course, things are going to flow a little bit differently. Usually spouses are leaving things to each other when they pass away, and you might have some different beneficiaries. And also those beneficiary designations. So you're going to find beneficiaries on your RSPs, your TFSAs, your insurance policies. Make sure those are up to date and reflective of your wishes. Now, we know that there are some tax benefits for spouses when one passes away. You could roll over your RSPs tax deferred. Those options are no longer available. So you need to make sure that you're planning for that. And then, of course, insurance, we do not want to overlook. As I mentioned, there might be that group benefit plan that they're no longer covered under. But also, you may have had insurance set up for survivor benefits for the other person. Often, if one person passes away, you want to make sure that the other one is adequately set up. And so, again, it's revisiting this, taking a look at their insurance needs, and making sure that they have adequate insurance in place if they are still in an insurable state.
I love the fact that you were talking about estate planning because that's next week's show. So we're going to talk about wills and everything else then. So this is a really good part one and part two. But I want to talk about the differences between men and women and when it comes to financial implications of gray divorce.
Yeah, so we often see the data shows that men are often much better off financially on the other side than women. And again, with this particular generation, men have been the breadwinner for the most part, most commonly, and it just puts them in a better situation. Men also, the stats show, are a little bit faster to get into that next relationship. And that's where you can combine assets again and have those households assets working together. And so in these situations, women just end up a little bit more disadvantaged when it comes to sort of their standard of living post-divorce. And so there's lots of sort of numbers out there, but sort of how much they're affected. But across the board, these numbers are saying they are more disadvantaged than men.
So I think it's important before we go to commercial break, I think it's important to bring up a couple of things. You talked about an RRSP and a rollover. So when you are going through a divorce, especially a gray divorce, you have to make sure that you update your beneficiary. And just
Yes.
and just as well for your tax-free savings account and your RRSP or RIF. And
Yes.
same thing, you must update your will because you want to make sure that if something happens to you, all of your belongings go to the right person and not the person that you had just divorced because you want to go forward. So please don't go away. We'll be right back with more Great Divorce and more of the financial implications that you will be looking forward to, but not really. Welcome back to Empowered. I'm Elizabeth Naumovski. Great Divorce. What are the financial impacts? To learn more, I'm joined by Julie Seberras, and she's the head of wealth planning and practice management at Manulife Wealth. So, Julie, let's keep going. Where is a good place to start if someone wants to start elevating their financial literacy?
Yes, there's so many tools and resources out there. So I'd say, don't get overwhelmed by the amount of information. Start really small. There's so many great things on, YouTube or podcasts or these types of things. So, really just start with the 101. And, to your point, Elizabeth, ask questions. So when you are meeting with your financial advisor, let's say, it's really important to ask the questions to your financial advisor. They are there to support you and provide that information. Unfortunately, a lot of times women don't know what questions to ask and don't want to appear, like they don't know. And so, but I encourage them, like, this is your opportunity to ask those questions. And it's somebody that's right in front of you. You can ask questions specific to you. And hopefully your financial advisor is able to explain it in a way. But it's really about leaning in and engaging. And unfortunately, I think too many women have this narrative around not being good with money. If they were told you're not good with money, they've told themselves over time, or, maybe you have people who are a little more creative and less number oriented. And so they believe that they're not good with money. And if you believe that, then you start to lean out, lean in, ask the questions and get involved. And I think it's really important also for financial advisors to bring women into this conversation. I think advisors will engage with sort of the individual that tends to take the lead with the finances, which is the male in the relationship. That's the person they're reaching out to book the appointments. That's the person that they may be focusing on in the meeting. And I think it's really important for financial advisors to be engaging both individuals. They need to be working with both couples in an objective way. And so they need to be validating that what's important to one is important to the other as well. And so, your mother spoke some wise words, which was ask questions.
And I love the fact that you said ask questions, and because a lot of us don't know which questions to ask. And that's why I created Empowered. I always
Yeah.
ask my guests, let's come up with some questions that most people don't know to ask, because that's the key right there. But everybody has to understand as well, there are no dumb questions. Every question has a proper answer to it, and it's a smart answer as well. And you know what? You can ask the same question over and over again until you understand it. So don't feel inferior and ask the questions, because you need to protect yourself and you need to know what's going on with your future. One of the questions I wanted to ask you are, what are the differences between men and women when it comes to the financial implications of gray divorce? Because this is a big deal.
Yeah. And so, as we were talking about, Elizabeth, this is where, women tend to be a little bit more disadvantaged on the other side financially. And, I think a lot of it, is because they didn't have their own assets. They now need to sort of ramp up their financial literacy. They didn't have that credit. Maybe they weren't involved in the financial planning process all along. And now they're in a situation where they're faced with divorce and they need to figure out all of this stuff for the future. And it's a lot. That is a lot to deal with. And so I think if, they start to take those steps that we were talking about, asking the questions, up their literacy, take inventory of what they have an understanding, be part of the process. Even if somebody is taking the lead when it comes to managing the day-to-day finances, there's nothing stopping from the other individual being involved and making sure they have an understanding and, really knowing, like I said, what you own, what you owe, what's coming in and what's going out.
So 3 words or less. You talked about leaning in. What do women need to do to lean in? 3 words.
Change the narrative. They need
Excellent.
to tell themselves, you got this.
You know what? Thank you so much. This has been really eye-opening, and I think a lot of people will benefit from it. So, Julie, thank you so much. Great topic, and we could talk about this for hours, but thank you for
All
being
day.
here.
Thanks for having me, Elizabeth.
Take care. Julie's message to you is own your narrative when it comes to your finances. Knowledge is power. There's a lot of information out there to help you get through tough times, and a lot of times it's extremely confusing. I am a huge advocate of asking questions when in doubt. Find a professional and ask questions so that you're on the right path for your financial future. I'm Elizabeth Naumovski, and I'm here to empower you and make frugality fashionable. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.